So welcome to this video. Today I'm going to be talking about Google Scripts. I'm going to be showing you how to create a Google script. And what we've got here, as you can see, is a spreadsheet full of data. I've used Premier League player stats for the season 2020-21. And I've got a list of player names, how they finished in terms of rank in the Premier League with goals scored, the minutes they played, the club they play for, so on and so forth. Now, what I eventually want to do with this script is I want to create tabs for each club and then pull in the data for those players into those tabs. I call them tabs, some people call them sheets, so it depends on what you want to call them. So as you can see, we've got Arsenal, Aston Villa, Brighton and Hove Albion, Burnley, and so on and so on. Now I've got these created already. That was just to basically show you the end product of the script and where we're going to get to. So I'm going to speed up this video just while I delete. Right, so welcome back. As you can see now, all I've got is one sheet called goals that contains all my master data. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go to Tools, and then we're going to want to go to Script Editor, and then this will open up the Script Editor tools. Now there will be another video coming out later this week that will just go through this app scripts section. It will go through the overview, the editor, the triggers, executions, settings, and just give you a little bit more in-depth detail as to what that is. The first thing we're going to want to do whilst we're in here is we're going to want to name our project. Usually what I do is I grab the name of my spreadsheet and I literally just paste that into there. The reason I do that is because if we get this onto an automatic script, which I'll show you later, if ever we have any errors or anything that happens to throw that script out, whether any timeouts or anything like that, we want to be able to identify exactly what that script is straight away. If we leave that as untitled, all you'll get, for every time you've written a script, you'll get an email that says error has occurred on untitled script. Now if you've got 10 scripts that are called untitled, it's going to be difficult to know exactly where that one is. Now of course you can click on it and you can have a look at it, but then you've got to look at that code and try and work out what it was. But if you've got it attached to this spreadsheet, you're going to know exactly what it is straight away. So moving on, we've got our code file here. It will automatically put some information in for you, so it will put functioning, because that's what we're creating. So it already tells you that we want to create a function, and then it gives that function a name, which is always my function by default. We want to go ahead and change that. Now you can change that and you can call it anything you want. I'm going to call it Club Tabs. Now what you have to remember, if you're going to use two words, it all needs to be one word. So if you start your first word all in lowercase, and then your second word, just start the first letter with a capital letter and then go back into lowercase, and the same with the third, fourth, or even fifth words if that's how many words you're going for. So you'll notice these two curly brackets here. We want to write our code inside of those curly brackets. The first curly bracket opens up the function. So we're saying this is the function name, and then we say what we're going to do in that function. The second one obviously closes it. So much like a formula where you've got your open and close brackets, that's exactly what we're doing with a function. With our curly brackets, we've got that open and close. So whilst we're here now, we want to start writing our code. So the first thing we want to do is create a variable. So we just type in var and then press enter, and then we've got to give our variable a name. Now the first thing we need to do is we need to call in our active spreadsheet. So if we give this a name which is going to be easier to remember and easier to call upon later, the last thing you want to be doing is writing a name of 10-20 letters, because then if you want to use that later, you've got to put those 10 and 20 letters in. I find it easiest just to go with a 2-letter or 1 letter and 1 number, and I always leave it lowercase. So if you start typing with a capital letter and go in sheet, sheet 21, like that for example, every time you write it you've got to remember to put that capital letter in first. So what I always do is I try to keep it lowercase, so I'll go SS, and I call my spreadsheet always, when I'm calling an active spreadsheet, I always call it SS. Just makes it so much easier when you call in upon it later. So we've got var SS, and then we want to put equals, and then after that we want to put a space, and we want to start telling this variable what function we're trying to call, or yeah. So it's spreadsheet app, and if you start typing, it'll bring it up and it'll give you a list of options that you can use within that variable. So spreadsheet app dot get active spreadsheet, so this is the one we want to use here, then open bracket and close bracket, and then we want to put a semicolon at the end of every line. So now we've called in our active spreadsheet, we need to call in our sheet. So I would always call this sheet 1, no matter what I've called it. If it's the first sheet in my list, I always call it S1. So equals SS. So we need to now tell this variable where to look for sheet 1. So sheet 1 is in the active spreadsheet, so we're going to type SS dot get sheet by name, and then we need to put the open and close brackets, and we also need to put the open comma and close comma, because we need to write this as a string. So by putting the open and close commas, just like the speech marks in a function, you're telling this variable that we're now looking for a string. So the string is goals. Now you can just type it in, obviously as I have done there, or another good way of doing it, if you can get into the habit of doing, is just to copy the sheet name from there. So double click that, Control C, back in, Control V. That way if anybody else has created that spreadsheet or been playing around with that spreadsheet and they've renamed tabs, if they put a space before it or a space after it, or they spelt it incorrectly and you've not noticed, then you're going to capture the exact way in which it is inputted into the tab, which is what you need, because you can't have any errors. So now we've got our sheet name. The next thing we're going to want to do is create a sheet in here called unique. So I'm just going to do it manually so you can see it. Called unique, and we're going to want to bring in the unique values of the clubs, because we're going to use the club names to determine the name of each tab. So equals unique, and it's goals C to C. So we've got all our teams in there now. So that is essentially what we want to get to, but we want to create a script to do that. Another thing I like doing every time is just to sort this and make it alphabetical. You might see that as being a little bit anal, a little bit over the top, but I just like to keep things in order. So I'm going to add a sort. I don't know why I did that. So sort by 1, true, and then that puts it all in alphabetical order. So we've got Arsenal, the mighty Aston Villa, Brighton and Hove Albion, Burnley, Chelsea, Crystal Palace, Everton, Fulham, so on and so forth. So we want to create a script or we want the script to basically do this work for us, because if this is something that's going to run over and over again, we don't want to be doing that every time. So the way we're going to do that is, the first thing we need to do is insert a sheet. Now I would call this S2 usually, but just to make it easier for you guys to follow, I'm going to call it unique. And unique is going to be equal to, or what we want to do in unique is we want to call it active spreadsheet again, but now we want to insert a sheet. So insert sheet, and we want to give that sheet a name. So again, open and close commas because we're writing a string, and unique, semicolon at the end. So now we've created that sheet. This script will now create that sheet. But now we want to put in some values. Just trying to think. Usually I would just call this unique, but because I've already used unique, so to stop, basically to explain my train of thought, usually I would call unique that we've got here, I would call that S2, and then when I'm writing the values here, I would call the values unique because they are unique values, but because I've already used that, I've got to call this something else. So I'm just going to call it uValues, and uValues is going to be equal to unique dot get range. So what I'm doing now is I'm telling this variable where I want to write that data. So I want to put it in A1. There's two ways in which I can do it. I can just type in A1 like so as a string, or we declare the row and then the column. So we're saying row 1 column 1. This is a way that I tend to go. So I always tend to do it this way, because when I'm writing an array of data, I then have to declare the end row and the end column. But we don't have to do this for that for this bit, because we're literally just calling that one cell. So I'm going to show you both ways because we'll use the other way later. So we'll just go with A1. Now we want to set a value into that cell, and that value that we want to set into that cell is a string, but the string is the formula. So when it writes this string in, it will write it as exactly as you see it in this formula bar here. So we want to take that, copy that, and we can just paste that in between those two commas or apostrophes, and then we want to enter down. So now what we're saying is we're going to create this sheet, and we're going to put that value into it. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to delete this, and we're going to run that just so you can see it. So as you can see, we've got the one sheet goals. I'm just going to go ahead and save that, and I'm going to run it. Now the first time I run it, it's going to pop up and it's going to ask for my permissions. This will always happen the first time, so just bear in mind that that will happen. So it's going to authorization required, review permissions, just click on your email address, and then you're going to have this app is requesting blah blah blah. To get past that, you click on advanced, and then you just click on go to whip or whatever the name of your file is, then just scroll down and allow. So that's started that execution, it's completed that execution. So if we go here, we've got the name, the tab unique with that formula in exactly as we've typed it into our script. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. So now we've got this file, what we want to do is we want to create a loop. which is going to loop through all that data, and it's going to create a tab per team name. So we want to start that with a for loop, open bracket and close bracket. So inside this for loop, we need to give a variable. So inside these two brackets, we need to give it a variable, and that variable is going to be I, and I is going to be equal to 0. Right, so basically what we're saying is the row is always going to be I, and the first row we want to look at is row 1, which in a loop is going to be row 0. And then we want to be looking in I whilst it's less than the last row of data. So that's going to be equals unique dot get last row. Oh, what have I done here? Oh, I've put in an open bracket and a close bracket. So whilst I is equal or less than the last row of data, then we want a semicolon again, and then once it's more than that, we want to break out of it. So that's what we're saying here with those two pluses. Then we want to put in our curly brackets again, because now, just like a function, we need to say what we're going to do inside of this for loop. So again, it's going to be about creating variables. So the first thing we want to do is create a variable. This variable we'll call club, because what we're going to look at here is the club names. So we're going to get the names of each club on each row. So to do that, we need to call in that unique tab again, and it's going to be get range. And what we want to do here now is we want to declare the row and the column. Now we could go 1 and 1, but every time this loop runs, it's just going to look at A1, 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 A1. So whatever club we've got in A1, which would be Arsenal, we'll just get multiple tabs for Arsenal, but then it will clash because there's already a tab for Arsenal, and it's just going to get confusing. What we need it to do is drop down every time. So to do that, we're going to go with I. So that will tell it what row we're looking at, but we can't go with just I. We have to go with I plus 1, because as you see there, the first row in the loop is going to be 0, but the first row of data is going to be 1. So we want to go I plus 1, because within your range, your first row is equal to 1, but within your loop, your first row is equal to 0. So for those two to match, you always need to put I plus 1. And then we want to look at the column, which is always going to be column 1, because that's where that data is. And then we want to get that value. So now what we're saying is, if we're looking at row 1, we want to get the value in that cell, which would be Arsenal, and if we're in row 2, we want to get the value of that cell, which would be Aston Villa. So now we've got that, we need to create a new sheet. So I always call this, well, I will call this new S1, and the reason I'm going to call this new S1 is because we could insert a sheet just like we did here, but if we just go ahead and press plus, which is what it's going to do, as you can see, there's no formatting. So to write a script to get all this formatting is going to be a lot of code that we don't really need to write. So the easiest way to do it is to duplicate this tab, and we can call that Aston Villa, and then we clear all that data, and then we bring in our new data. So the easiest way to do that is to duplicate with a script. How do we duplicate with a script? Well, we've got our variable, we've given our variable a name, so we need to copy sheet 1. So we go S1 dot copy to, and we need to say where we're going to copy it to, which is obviously going to be our active spreadsheet. And then we need to set the name of that tab. Now, we don't want to be writing a string in here. We want to get the name from this row that we've just written out of here, this row of code that we've just written out here, so all we need to do to pull that data in is club. So that will now set that tab to the value or the name that we're looking at in that row. So now what we want to do is we want to clear that data. So because it's not something I'm going to call up on later, I don't need to create a variable for it. So new s, all I need to do now is I need to start typing out how I'm going to clear that data. So obviously the sheet that data that I want to clear is in our new sheet that we've just created, and then obviously we want to get the range, but we want to keep the headers. So we don't want to start at row 1, we want to start at row 2, column 1, and then we want to get that last row of data. So to get that last row of data, we just go new s1 dot get last row, then we open bracket, close bracket. Then we want to get the last column, so we do exactly the same again, new s1 dot get last column. So that now gets us all that data from row 2 all the way down to the last row and all the way across to the last column. Then all we need to do now is clear that data, so we do dot clear, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon at the end to finish that row off. So we've got our new sheet, we've cleared the data, so we've duplicated that sheet, we've cleared the data, it's now looking like that. Well, all we need to do now is we need to pull in that data. So the easiest way to do that, I find, is to use a filter formula. So we're going to go equals filter, and we can go A all the way across to J, where CC is equal to, and I'm going to pick on my club, the mighty Aston Villa. So then that pulls in all that data. So all I've done there is I've used a filter function, and I'm going to use that within the script. So I now need to create a variable called formula, and this is going to be equal to a string, and that string is going to be my filter formula. Now, I know what you're going to be saying. You're going to say to me, every time we pull that in, we're just going to look at Aston Villa. So every sheet, whether it's be called Tottenham Hotspurs, Brighton and Hove Albion, Burnley, Manchester United, Man City, whatever, it's always going to pull in data from Aston Villa because that's what it's saying in there. And you'd be right. So what we need to do is we need to break up this string. Where do we want to end the string? We want to end the string just before the letter A of Aston Villa. So we want to end that string there, and then we want to start it again after the last A of Aston Villa. Right, so now we've broken up that string. So in here now we can write a function, or we can say we want to bring in club, but before we bring in club we've got to add a plus and a plus again. So just like if you were creating a formula here, so let me just delete that information. So if you was to say that is equal, so hang on, let me make it easier. So that's done. So just like a normal formula, if you wanted to bring in those two together, that's not going to work, is it? But if you want to say I want to do B2 and C2, it'll bring it together and it'll join it, much like the join formula, but you're using equals and you're using and. So that's exactly what we're doing here. So we're saying we want to put this string and the value of club and this string. So that now becomes a variable formula. So all we need to do now is we need to insert that into our new sheet. Again, because this isn't something I'm going to call upon later, I don't need to create a variable, so I can just go with new s1 dot get range, and I need to tell this range now, or tell this script where I want to write this data. So I don't want to write it on row 1 because I've got my headers. I want to write it on row 2, and I want to put it into column 1. Then I need to set the value, and the value is going to be, of course, formula. So I've now got to a point where I've created this tab and I've got that information in, but obviously because there's a formula in here, if anybody else comes into this sheet, so if it's a shared sheet, if anybody else comes in and they say see John McGinn, and they think he started 38 games, so they're trying to override that data, it's all gone. Obviously you'd have to delete that, it comes back in, but just to make it cleaner, I like to copy and paste that as text rather than as a formula. So that's what we're going to be doing next. Right, so obviously we've got that in there, so we're going to start a copy. So var, so we want a variable club copy, so C copy, I'm calling this for club copy, and that is going to be looking into sheet 1, or the new sheet 1, sorry. Then we want to get range, we want to get row 1, column 1, then we want to get that last row of data again, dot get last row, and we want to get that last row of data from the last column. So we want to get that last column of data, sorry, I'll dot get last column. So that now has got me all that data, but I haven't actually got the data yet, so I need to get value, but because it's an array I need to get values. So I've now got that array of data that's copied. All I need to do now is paste it. So again, it's not a variable I'm going to call upon again later, so I don't need to declare it as a variable. And in actual fact, because this is very similar to this, all I need to do is copy and paste it, but instead of leaving it at get values, I can set values, and then I can go here and call that variable. So now I'm setting that values. So I've copied the text values from there and I've pasted them back in. So essentially all I'm doing is I've got this sheet, I've control C'd it, and I've pasted it back in as values, so I've no longer got that formula there. but we're getting the script to do that, and we're getting it to do it with every sheet. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this sheet so that you can see we've only got goals left. Now we've nearly finished this script now. Obviously we've finished our loop. That's everything we want to do in the loop. The last thing I do, just to tidy it up, is always delete that unique values sheet. So I'm going to go and call that active spreadsheet again, and then I'm going to go delete sheet, and then you have to tell it the name of the sheet that you want to delete. We've already got it declared there in a variable, so I'm just going to call that. And that is our script done. So if I run that, providing there's no errors, which there shouldn't be, it will start to create all these tabs here. So we've got our unique values, we've got Arsenal, all the Arsenal players, with no formula, Aston Villa players, no formula, and once it's finished it will delete that unique sheet. So whilst that is doing that, I just want to thank you if you've lasted this far, or lasted this long. If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure that you like, share, comment, subscribe. If you're working on anything in particular at the moment, and you need any help with that at all, or you want me to create a video that you feel may help you, then mention it in the comments. Let me know what you're working on, and hopefully I can get a video done to help you. If not, help others that are facing a similar issue. I have got a gig on Fiverr. I'm currently creating a Facebook page, and I'm going to put, so the links to those are going to be in the description. I'm also going to put a link to a document that contains the script in case you want to play around with that later. I have got another couple of videos which I will be releasing later this week, as I mentioned earlier. One of those will be just explaining this app script a little bit more, and what we can do with the functions, and more about what is in each tab. There'll also be a little bit extra adding to this, which will delete all the sheets ready to start again. So I'll go through that again. The video was a little bit long, so I didn't want to complete that today, so that'll be a third video which will relate to this. So yeah, again, if you've enjoyed this video and it's helped you out, please let me know. Mention me, we'll put it in the comments. Let me know what you're working on as well. Be good to hear.